Hi, I'm Katie and I am so excited to teach you how to make compost tea today. I like to make compost tea in this 10-gallon compost tea brewer, and I'm also going to show you how to do it in a 5-gallon bucket. But first what we need to do is take off this lid here and fill it with water before we plug it in. So while that's filling, I'll just say that I love compost tea for plants. I like to think of it as like a vitamin or a mineral that gives plants a really wonderful boost when you're starting to grow them. You can spray it on their leaves as a foliar spray, or you can water them in the ground with the compost tea. So now we have this 10-gallon compost tea brewer filled with water up to the fill line, and this 5-gallon bucket also filled with water. This was straight from the hose, so what we need to do now is plug these in and let them run for at least 2 hours. Some people like to let them run overnight. This is to get the chlorine out of the water. You want all the chlorine to come out so that when you put in your compost and all the things with the good organisms, they won't die. Before I plug this in, because it's kind of loud and has a hum, I'll show you that what I do with the 5-gallon bucket compost tea system is I just get this fish pump. So these fish pumps you can get at pet stores, hardware stores, and then you can connect a couple little stones to them. These are the aeration stones that just go in the fish tank. And I'll plug this in here. And sometimes it's nice to have little clips on the edge to hold them. My little clips. So I have these two stones. They're almost touching the bottom of the bucket on either sides of the bucket, and I just set up this little pump on top of another stack of buckets there. And then I plug this in and let it go for 2 hours, as well as this. I'm going to move this system over in a minute to let this one continue going, but since I only have one extension cord with an outlet, we're going to prioritize doing the 10-gallon. So I'll plug this in and then come back in a couple hours to add the stuff. Alright, now we are ready to add our ingredients. This compost tea brewer actually bubbled overnight, and we're doing this video right now the following day because the lighting's better. You can let it bubble anywhere up to 12 hours or even 24 hours. This bubbled overnight, just the minimum is 2. If you don't have chlorinated water, like if you're on well water, you could probably skip this step entirely. The aeration is just to get the chlorine out. But now we're going to add our ingredients, and I'm just going to unplug it for now, so you could probably hear my voice better. But we do want to keep it bubbling after we add our stuff. So I'll show you my little recipe card that I use initially. I use 8 cups of compost, and I use Vermicompost, which we're going to get. I use fish emulsion and kelp. This one's kelp, this one's fish. And I use a little bit of molasses. This is the food for the bacteria that is going to help it proliferate in the compost tea. And I use azomite. This is volcanic rock dust, and it has a lot of amazing trace minerals. And then other materials, you will need a cup for mixing everything, and this is kind of my measuring cup because I've made compost tea with this a lot, so I kind of know the levels. A teaspoon also for measuring, and I just grab a kitchen knife so that I can help mix things up. So first things first, I'm going to fill this up with compost, and this plastic cup, when it's filled to the top, is equivalent of 2 cups of compost. And since we want 8 cups of compost in this 10-gallon tea brewer, I'm going to fill this up 4 times. And I've got my hory knife to dig in the vermicompost, and so I'm just going to dig around in there and get some good compost. So this is vermicompost, which are worm castings, really, really rich and so good for the soil. So I'm going to use this as my compost. You could use store-bought compost. I of course think it's better if you make it, and vermicompost is the best. I do have a video on that if you are interested in learning how to make vermicompost. So this is 2 cups, and we're going to drop this in first. Nayland is going to help us here. Thank you, Nayland. And so you can you can see this mesh strainer here. We're going to put everything inside the mesh strainer, and that's where all our ingredients are going to go. Thank you. So we'll fill this up 3 more times. All right, so we just added the last cup of compost here, and next I like to do the molasses. And because I've done this, I know the level to put it at, but if you're measuring for the first time, you want to do 12 teaspoons of molasses. I use the unsulfured molasses here. And so for me, 12 teaspoons is right at the bottom of this cup where the pattern starts. And I just fill right up to there. I know. Here. It's a good treat too. And now, because molasses is very sticky, I like to lift this up a little bit and get some of the water in here and just kind of stir it up and get it loose. And I might have to do this a couple more times. I'm gonna pour that in there. That's pretty good. And now the 12 teaspoons of kelp, that'll be at the same level that the molasses was at. So I just measure 12 teaspoons of kelp, which I know is right about there. And then this is the fish. I get these, the fish and the kelp from Peaceful Valley Organics. And the fish is about 6 teaspoons, so that's half of what the kelp was. Fishy. Alright. Now, I'm going to just get this a little bit mixed. Pour that in there. So it's done. Now we're going to add the azomite, the volcanic rock dust. And this we want to measure 8 teaspoons. You want to measure? So take this and pour it in the cup 8 times. That's good. 1. So that's in there. You want to dump it? You might need some water. Right, then we'll get some water to stir up the rest of it. Dump that in. Great. And so that's all there is to it, really. And then we'll put the cap back on and plug it back in. It's important that this tea bubbles and aerates the entire time that it's going, because these bacteria need oxygen to flourish and thrive. And so at minimum, I like to run this compost tea for 24 hours. So I just do a whole day cycle. I'll come back the next day, tomorrow, around evening time, to put it on the plants. You could also let it run 48 hours. 24 to 48 hours is prime. And so that's bubbling. I do have the 5-gallon compost tea brewer going. It's just got its water, so we're going to add the ingredients in that too, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so we're going to do pretty much the same thing that we did in here, but we're going to have the ingredients, because this is a 10-gallon tea brewer, and here we're going to do it in a 5-gallon bucket. And I am going to use this mesh produce bag as the filter. So we're going to add all our ingredients in here. So we'll start with our compost like we did last time. Here, help me to put it in the bag. This part's helpful with 2 people, so can you hold this while I get more compost? And then I'll bring this back over there and plug it in, and also let this go for 24 hours. And then tomorrow around this time, we'll harvest our compost tea and put it on our plants. One more quick mention. You don't want to leave an open bucket of water, especially if you have little ones running around or in the community, cats, animals. So sometimes just a simple grate like this that you could fit through the clothespins will do the trick, and that it's a lot safer this way. Next day, it's been a full 24 hours and we are ready to harvest our compost tea. You'll notice first off that I have this raised on a platform. It's on our deck so that I can easily slip something underneath it and harvest the compost tea. So I just unplugged it, and I'm going to harvest the tea into a water can, and I like to water the plants this way so they get a full leaf drench and a little bit of a soil watering with the compost tea. A lot of other growers, if you have a lot that you want to spray compost tea on, they'll do a backpack sprayer. Those work really well, and you can spray a lot of compost tea with those. I like this because I don't have as many plants that I'm going to water today, and the backpack sprayers are kind of heavy and cumbersome. But it's just as simple as letting it all flow out. And it's pretty well strained because of this strainer in here. There might be a little bit of sediment at the bottom. If you are doing a backpack sprayer, you'll want to use a fine mesh strainer to put at the spout to do another filtration, because these backpack sprayers can get clogged pretty easily. And the smell of the compost tea, I always like to smell it. It should smell really earthy and a little bit fishy because we added that fish and the kelp. It should never smell rancid. If it smells rancid, you know you kind of did something off. And it would really only smell rancid if you didn't aerate it really well. But yeah, this smells good. It smells like earth, compost, and a little bit fishy. So we're gonna take this over to the plants and give them a good drench. So I like to do compost tea on plants every couple weeks in their growing cycle. So when they are leafing out, it's most important. It's less important to do compost tea when they're flowering. You really want to give them this nutrients as they are in their vegetative growth, growing their leaves. It's also best to do compost tea watering at night. Right now the sun is going down, and so this is a perfect time to give these plants a good drench of compost tea, because then they have the entire night without the harsh sun to be able to soak up this tea and to take it into their leaves. Alright, and so for harvesting the 5-gallon bucket one, it's pretty self-explanatory. It might be a little bit messier because it doesn't have a spout like the 10-gallon brewer, but you basically just want to take everything out here, let that drip. And with both of these here, actually, both of these, I will return these back to my compost pile. A lot of times I'll accidentally get worms or other organisms in here, and surprisingly they're always still alive. So I always like to just dump this back into the compost pile before I clean it. And I already unhooked the motor because I had it plugged in over there. So you just kind of unhook everything. Some things might have fallen in. And this, again, if you're going to do a backpack sprayer, you might want to have someone hold a second filtration for it to go through, but since I'm just using a watering can, I'm going to go ahead and tip this in there. And then it's ready to use. Just a couple more notes. Compost tea is best used right away, right after you make it. So as soon as you unplug it and you're ready to harvest it, go through all of it. If you can't go through all of it in one day, keep it plugged in and bubbling until you're going to use the rest of it. And then it's also important to clean it right after you use all of the compost tea. The inside will be a little bit bubbly and might have a layer of kind of like slime on the inside, and so it's just pretty easy to take a brush and clean it right away. If you wait, it gets caked on there a little bit. So plan to clean it right after you use it, just to keep your system running smooth and nice. And the last thing I want to say is that compost tea should be seen as like a vitamin and a boost. It's not the cure-all for plants. Your focus should really be on the soil, and compost tea is kind of like a band-aid. It's kind of like if your soil's depleted and you need to give your plants a good boost, but you shouldn't rely on it. So the emphasis should always be on building your soil and getting good soil fertility in. But meanwhile, while you're doing that, your plants would be really happy with some vitamin boost from the compost tea. So I hope you found this video informative, and I hope this inspires you to make some compost tea. And if you have any questions, you can let me know in the comment box, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Thank you.